Every morning, road maintenance workers were driving along a quiet rural road in a Chicago suburb when one of them noticed something strange, a purse lying. A purse lying on the side of the road, half open, and resting against the metal guardrail as if someone had placed it there calmly before leaving. The worker stepped closer, then took another step. When he looked behind the guardrail, he froze in his tracks. Just behind the barrier lay the body of a young girl, placed in a calculated manner. It was as if whoever left her there wanted to send the world one message: a simple traffic accident, a tragic driver, a tragedy without a killer. No need to investigate. No need to investigate. But the message the killer so carefully crafted did not stay silent for long. A few hours were enough for the accident story to collapse and reveal a far more gruesome tale in its place. What no one could have imagined at that moment was that the answer to the question left that morning would require 44 whole years of waiting, and that all the tools investigators had that morning would not be enough to uncover the killer. The victim was a 16-year-old girl named Pamela Maurer. She was a junior at Downers Grove South High School and lived with her family in the town of Woodridge. Chicago's suburbs during that era were a safe environment where front doors were left unlocked and children would go to their friends' houses after dark without anyone watching them from the windows. But in Butte, there was nothing to fear in that area, and no reason to be afraid on the night of January 12, 1976, in Dutinado. Pamela was visiting a friend in the neighboring town of Leal, Utah, sometime between 9:30 and 10 p.m. She stepped out of the house for a very short distance to buy a soda from the nearest shop. This was the last recorded movement of her night. It wasn't a night adventure or a reckless decision, it was just a soda. But she never returned home. Her parents reported her missing that night, and the next morning, when road workers found that purse in the snow and then the body behind the guardrail on College, the road in Lyle, the first question became clear. No one was asking where Pamela went anymore. The question that remained open, and which would consume the coming decades, was about one man. Who is he? Where did he come from? And how could a man be this cold, staging a crime scene, and then disappearing completely without leaving a single thread to hold on to? As investigators arrived and the medical examiner examined the body, the traffic accident narrative collapsed. Within minutes, the visible bruises on her neck revealed everything, and the piece of rubber hose lying near the body confirmed the rest. Pamela did not die under the wheels of a passing car. She had been sexually assaulted, then strangled, then transported to that exact location to be left behind. And most dangerously, whoever committed the crime was cold enough to stage the scene afterward, return to his car, and vanish into the darkness without anyone catching a glimpse of his face, even from a distance. The choice of the location itself revealed the killer's personality. The road at night was a place where one could pull over for a few minutes without drawing any attention. Whoever placed the body there knew the area well enough to make a calculated decision. This was not a disposal made in panic. This was a man managing the aftermath of a crime with nerves of steel. The investigation focused on a clear hypothesis from the start. Pamela did not know her killer. It was not a personal dispute or a failed relationship, but rather a predator who selected his victim based solely on proximity and opportunity. Names emerged and backgrounds were studied and files were cross-referenced, but every lead ended in a dead end, and by the end of that year, the case had no suspect. One thing, however, had been preserved securely. A biological sample taken from Pamela's body, stored with care without anyone knowing at the time that it would be the only bridge between the year 1976 and the truth. Cases like Pamela's do not collapse all at once, they erode slowly. A lead runs out and is not replaced. An investigator is transferred to another task, and a new one arrives to read the file with fresh eyes, only to collide with the same obstacles and reach the same dead ends. Pamela's family later moved to Texas, and life moved on in its usual direction, one where there is no room for unanswered questions. More, but the question itself never closed. Meanwhile, a classmate of Pamela's, a girl named Cindy Evans, was carrying a heavy secret in. She was supposed to accompany her friend on that January night, but her parents punished her for her grades and kept her at home. This detail would only show its full importance 44 years later, because the girl grounded in her room had been very close to being the victim behind the barrier. The first real turning point in the file came in 2001. Investigators sent the biological sample preserved since 1976 to a modern forensic lab, where they extracted a full genetic profile of the unknown killer. For the first time in a quarter century, the case file moved. The profile was entered into the federal database known as CODIS, which collects DNA from convicts in the United States. Everyone waited, but the search yielded nothing. The database expanded, and millions of criminals were added. Yet each time it grew, the answer remained the same: total silence. What no one knew at the time was that the reason was both simple and terrifying. The DNA of Pamela's killer was not, and would never be, in any official database whatsoever. In 2018, something happened that changed criminal science forever. In California, a man known to the media as the Golden State Killer, Joseph James D'Angelo, was arrested using a method never before. In a case of this magnitude, investigators uploaded DNA taken from an old crime scene to a public genealogy site called GEEEUs to search for their origins and distant relatives, and they tracked partial matches with second and third cousins, narrowing the circle generation by generation until they arrived at a single name. This was the first time a major case had been solved through what would later be known as investigative genetic genealogy. The moment the news broke, many police departments across the United States opened their old files and asked one question: could this technique solve our cases too? In the town of Lisle, Illinois, a detective named Chris Loudon was the first to take initiative. The file he chose to reopen was Pamela Maurer's. The detective sent the preserved sample to a specialized nanolabs, which conducted an advanced analysis called DNA phenotyping, the process of deducing a person's proximate physical features from their genetic code. The analysis resulted in a virtual image of the man, along with a very striking detail: green eyes, a rare color found in only 2% of the world's population. For the first time, the killer had a face, but the big question remained unanswered: to whom did these samples belong? And why, after all these years, had his name not come a single step closer to police files? The case was handed to the famous genetic genealogist and more, the company's chief genealogist, who was accustomed to building family trees from partial matches and tracking killers through distant cousins until all possibilities were narrowed down to one name that could only be him. Pamela's killer's profile was uploaded to the GEDmatch database, and somewhere in the United States, a person had voluntarily uploaded their own DNA to search for their origins, unaware that they were opening the door to over 40 years old. Also, a partial match appeared, not a direct one, but that of a distant cousin. The scientist began building the tree branch by branch, pruning the branches that did not intersect and following those that drew closer, until the entire tree narrowed down to a single point, a point with a name, a man named Bruce Irvin Lindahl. A man named Bruce Irvin Lindahl. Lindahl was born on January 9, 1953, in the town of St. Charles, Illinois, and he grew up in the same county where Pamela lived. He graduated from Downers Grove North High School, adjacent to Downers Grove South High School, where Pamela was a student. He lived and worked in those suburbs throughout the 1970s and was 23 years old on the night of the crime. However, investigators faced a major obstacle. Lindahl had passed away in 1981, just 5 years after Pamela's murder, and nearly 4 decades before his name was revealed. There was only one way to confirm the result. There was no alternative. His body had to be exhumed from the grave, and a sample taken remains decades after his burial. When they did, investigators discovered something they hadn't expected. Pamela was not his only victim. On the surface, Lindahl seemed perfectly normal and athletic young man who loved skydiving and playing tennis, holding a technical degree and working as a licensed electrician. He moved between small apartments in several towns, so no police department in the area could form a complete picture of him. Each department saw only a small part of his life, and no one was able to see the whole. Since the mid-70s, his file had accumulated minor legal run-ins, all ending in the same pattern: an arrest, a fine, an arrest, a fine. Then the charges dropped. One of his friends was a police officer, and it seems this friendship was enough to drop some cases before they reach a courtroom. The law caught him many times over the years, and each time he escaped. He interpreted this escape in his own way and continued on his path. The expanded investigation revealed that Pamela's crime was just the beginning. In March 1979, Lindahl lured a young woman in her 20s named Ann Lazara to his home in the city of Aurora under the pretext of selling her marijuana. He held a gun to her head and assaulted her. When the young woman went to the police, her testimony was questioned because the house belonged to his officer friend, so Lindahl escaped without any charges being filed against him. On the 5th of November of this same year, a 16-year-old student named Deborah McCall left Downers Grove North High School and never returned. The student's body has not been found to this day, even though her photos were later discovered inside Lindahl's apartment in June 1980. A young woman named Deborah Galliander was kidnapped from a parking lot in Aurora. He took her to his apartment and assaulted her, but she escaped while he was sleeping and reported it to the police. He was arrested and released on bail 2 weeks before his trial. Lindahl told a friend that he had offered him $2,000, a gun, a bottle of whiskey, and a box of pills to make the woman disappear before she could testify against him. The friend did not act and did not report it to anyone. On the 7th of October, 1980, the witness left her work and no one ever saw her alive after that. In April 1982, her body was found buried in a rural field in the Oswego area, and the death was classified as a homicide. Then came the final night of Lindahl's own life on the 4th of April, 1981. He spent the evening bowling with an 18-year-old named Charles Huber in city of Naperville before moving to an apartment there. Lindahl attacked his guest with a kitchen knife, stabbing him 28 times. During the attack, he accidentally slashed his own femoral artery with the same knife and bled to death on the floor. When the apartment was later discovered, it contained 2 bodies. Lindahl and his victim, the killer, died inside his final crime, becoming a statistic before any real file on his previous crimes could be opened. Lindahl's name was not mentioned in the Pamela Maurer investigation until 38 years after his death. On January 8, 2020, exactly the 44th anniversary of the morning Pamela's body was found, DuPage County State's Attorney Robert Berlin stood before cameras in Wheaton, Illinois, and uttered a sentence the family had waited decades to hear. For quote, 44 years, this crime remained a mystery, and today the mystery is finally solved. The same friend who was supposed to accompany Pamela that night, the girl who had been grounded by her parents for her grades, attended the press conference. She spoke a few words about the relief she felt knowing the killer was a complete stranger, that Pamela did not die in vain, and that she had fought back before she was killed. The question that remains hanging before us all is, how many cases that seem completely closed today are waiting for a technology yet to be revealed, or a family tree branch that no one has yet uploaded to a database? And can the truth, no matter how long it takes, really remain buried forever? Share your thoughts with us in the comments.